Broadcasting on the internet airwaves from the great state of Minnesota. My name is Shaun, and you're listening to The Shaun Tabatt Show. Today, my special guest is Jefferson Bethke, and we're talking about his new book, It's Not What You Think, Why Christianity is About So Much More Than Going to Heaven When You Die, and that's published by my good friends over at Thomas Nelson Publishers. Jefferson, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, first off, Jefferson, let's help the audience get to know you a bit better. I know a lot of my listeners are going to recognize you from your spoken word video, Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus. That went viral back in, I think it was around 2012 on YouTube, and I just looked that up today, and it's had more than 30 million views. What's your life's journey been like since that video blew up?
That video was, early 2012, so it's been almost 3.5 years now, I guess, almost 4 coming up, and it really turned everything upside down, which is really cool. It's a really unique story that not many people can say they owe everything to 4 minutes and 52 seconds or whatever on YouTube. I was working at a community center, which I loved. It was a great job, but not really in line with what I wanted to do and passion. I really always had a dream to write, but never really thought it could really happen. So when the video happened, it just kind of spiraled, and I was able to do more videos. I speak, which is fun, and then have been able to author a couple books, which has always been a dream.
Well, you're a real live YouTube sensation. That's exciting. So your new book is titled, It's Not What You Think, Why Christianity is About So Much More Than Going to Heaven When You Die. And I think one of the things that's going to stop people in their tracks is that subtitle. Would love to get a bit of the backstory. Why such an edgy subtitle?
Yeah, so the whole premise of that subtitle is kind of the heartbeat of the book, that we don't realize in Western 21st century America, or also American Christianity, how much postmodernity, how much Epicureanism, all these different streams of thought over the last 2,000 years have really impacted how we see Jesus, how we see the scriptures. And one of the main things that has totally flipped what I think the biblical worldview is this kind of idea of evacuation, that it's really, Christianity is basically, this place is terrible, it's going to burn up one day, so just hold on tight, go in the woods, read Left Behind books, and you'll get raptured one day too. Now, that might be a caricature, but a lot of people do really believe, just hold on tight, this place is getting worse and worse and worse, and we'll get to go to heaven one day when we die. And so then it becomes all about getting people saved so they can go to heaven, when the worldview of Scripture is very much about God created the heavens and the earth, and it's kind of like this marriage dynamic in Genesis where there were two become one, and because of sin, it ripped apart, and so it was God created this good and beautiful and amazing world, but because of our mistake and our sin, it broke it, it fractured the cosmos, and now God's putting it all back together with the very people who broke it, which is kind of a crazy element of grace, right? And so that's a very polar opposite story, because then that story is not about leaving this place, that story is about restoring this place. And when you read the scriptures, that is actually the story you see. You see that God is descending closer and closer to his people. So it's about him coming down to this place. You get the words of Jesus, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, that doesn't make any sense if it's all about actually leaving this place, right? Why would I want to make this place like heaven if it's about leaving this place? And then you go to Revelation 21:22, and that's the stage that's set there. Is, it says that the new heavens came down to earth like a bride adorned for her husband. So it's that marriage oneness language again, that the story worked, that it succeeded. God has put heaven and earth back together. And so, I just think that's a different story, if that made sense.
Totally makes sense. And I think that's an encouraging message, although challenging, a message that we need to hear. I've heard so many people say things like, I prayed the prayer, I signed the card, and gosh, I sure hope the rapture comes soon because things are getting bad. And that's such an odd view of a redeemed and transformed Christian life. If that's the case, there's nothing for us to do while we wait for the rapture. We're saved and we're good. We can just go hide in our closets and pray. But I think God has so much more for us to do while we're here.
Exactly. And that's very much the premise of where the book's coming from.
So early in the book, you talk about that Christianity is a bounce check to your generation, and I'm going to assume you might be a millennial. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I would like to get a bit more about what you mean by that, and how can we, either as Christians or the church as a whole, make better promises to this upcoming generation?
The whole premise of that part is I think that a lot of my generation, I don't think it's generation specific, but definitely pertinent to mine, that we played the game. We signed the card. We did all these different things. We tried to be good Christians and all that stuff. And then a lot of us, when we got to high school or college, it just didn't work. And that's a myriad of reasons. One is maybe just that temptation happened and we just said, no, we don't want Christianity anymore. But also I think there's a lot of just the fact that what we were given wasn't the real thing in the first place. It didn't have depth. It didn't have staying power like the resurrection really does and like the good news of gospel really does. And so that's where that is kind of saying, hey, what if we actually showed them a Christianity that does deliver, that you can cash in using the Czech language per se. And that's what the whole book's about, is that when you really get down to these pillars that were really important to first century people and believers like Sabbath and table and temple, it just makes your faith really strong and it gives it a lot of fiber and stuff per se. And so that's what the premise of that is.
Well, and I think that's something that is really appealing to this younger generation. I'm edging up near 40, but it still appeals to me too, where there's a whole lot more to being a Christian on the sacramental side, church, communion, all that sort of stuff. And then when it comes to serving outside the church and within the church, again, I'll come back to that God has a lot for us to do while we're here.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I know a lot of Christians who spend an awful lot of time focused on managing their sin, but you write in the book that our focus should be on how God is restoring all things. What does that practically look like in everyday life?
You see in Genesis that God creates everything and it's good. So that's music and art and food and all these different things. And I think we sometimes think those things are non-spiritual, but if God created them, then they are spiritual because everything's spiritual. And so, we're a mix of body and flesh and spirit and soul. And so that's what the premise of that part is saying, man, what does it look like when we actually see all of God's good creation and we try to restore and build and redeem in that part?
Another thing that you talk about in the book is Sabbath and rest. And I think one of the marks of our current age, and I think it spans all generations right now, is that everybody is overburdened, exhausted. They're just tired and busy all the time. And you have an entire chapter focused on that. How is our current practice of rest that we often see, both inside and outside the church, how is that different than when God really intended? And what's the corrective that we might be able to put in place to do it differently?
To kind of rest better, you mean?
Yes, definitely. Or rest at all.
Yeah, exactly. I think we don't realize that the world operates, well, it's kind of like music, right? Like music is a law, meaning it's doing what it does and it doesn't change. The rhythm is the rhythm. And you can either dance and step into that rhythm or not and look stupid or try to, buck the rhythm, or like you can't change the music is what I'm trying to say. And so I think there's same thing with the cosmos, that there's a rhythm about the world. There's a rhythm of the fact that there's night and day, night and day, night and day, or the fact that there's these weekly rhythms and yearly rhythms with how we spin and the earth and the sun. And so it's very clear that there's rhythms, but I think especially in today, we kind of have this invincible thing where we think that that's not true. We can just do whatever we want. And one of those rhythms I think that's very innate that we have to get back to is rest, that we were created to work. Work is a gift and a blessing. So we're created to work, but rest. There's this rhythm and dance back between the two. And so I think just getting back to rhythms, whether you're married or in college or whatever, just set goals for your rhythms. Set goals for a daily rhythm, a weekly rhythm, a monthly rhythm, and a yearly rhythm, and say, what do I want these to look like? What do I want when I look back on the week? What do I want it to look like? When I look back on every day, what's something I want to do every day? And I think we should build rest into all of those, but specifically I talk about in the weekly realm of really taking a day off to celebrate, to eat well, and to really cultivate relationships.
Well, and I think that is just going to spill over into everything we have going on. If we rest on Sunday, I think the following Monday through Saturday is just going to be that much better.
Exactly.
When you were working on this book, who was the audience or the intended reader that you had in the back of your mind? I deal with a lot of authors, and we talk about, with a new book or proposal we're looking at, who are those first 1,000 true fans that you're writing this book for? Who did you have in your mind for this book?
It's a big task, but I also tried to do it with my first book, where I tried to write both for disenchanted people who have thrown off Christianity, and then also just Christians who maybe haven't gone that deep with scriptures or with their own journey. And so, yeah, that's kind of the same audience, I would say, with this one.
Well, when you think of each reader getting to that final page of It's Not What You Think, for you, what's your prayer? How do you hope their life has been impacted by what they read in the book?
Yeah, I hope they just really get to the place of really seeing that it's deeper and more full and really answers all of life's questions. It's not disconnected from life. It really Christianity gives you a worldview of how to do meals, how to take care of your finances, how to do art, It's just recovering the fact that God is God over all and it's all good. And we need to redeem it, restore it, and continually help him alongside his job of putting it back together.
And earlier you mentioned that you do some speaking. Obviously, you still do the videos on YouTube. What are some of the different creative outlets that you're exploring right now and in the year ahead?
Yeah, so I have an e-course that's basically, I've been doing that lately, where it's like an e-course on how to study the Bible, where it's basically a Bible study with curriculum and videos and all that, but it's all digital, which is cool. So you can do it from your phone or computer. I still make YouTube videos. Me and my wife do a podcast, and then we both are still writing. So that's kind of our rhythms of what we are always working on.
And for you, since you got your big start or your big launch with video, was it a difficult transition into some of these other mediums and forms of communication?
No, not at all. I think I've always really enjoyed them and always wanted to do stuff like this. So yeah, it seemed pretty seamless.
Jefferson, if the listeners want to find out more about you, find out more of your book, your courses, all the different things that you have going on, where are some of the places they can connect with you on the web?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Jefferson Bethke, on Instagram at Jefferson Bethke, jeffbethke.com is my website. They can track me down on any of those places.
All right, and I'll be sure to include links to all the places you can find Jefferson in the show notes for this episode, which will be available at shauntabatt.com. And it's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation today with Jefferson Bethke, talking about his new book, It's Not What You Think. For more on Jefferson and the book, you can visit his website at jeffbethke.com, and you can also find out more at the publisher's website, which is available at thomasnelson.com. Jefferson, want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you.
Hey, thank you so much. It's been a blast.
And that's all for this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can connect with me via email using show@shauntabatt.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, where I go by the Twitter handle @stabatt. And if you enjoy the show, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Until next time, this is your host, Shaun Tabatt, signing off.